Hello and welcome to Decoding the New Economy. Today I'm joined by Ros Harvey, Director of Sense T, a very innovative and new project on the Internet of Things in Tasmania. Ros, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
To kick off with, could you explain what Sense T is?
Well, Sense T, what we're doing is we're creating a digital view of the state, bringing together historical, spatial and real-time data. But the real issue is not actually the data, it's what you do with it. And so we're working with industries and communities to really create value out of the data through user-friendly apps that can help people make better decisions.
Okay, so how are you collecting that data?
Well, we're actually federating data. Sometimes it comes from the public sector, organisations like the Bureau of Meteorology, sometimes it comes from industry, sometimes it comes from state government or utilities. And then what we're doing is we're actually doing specific projects with particular industries and communities, and we're deploying our own sensors as part of that process.
Right, so a lot of the data is being gathered by sensors, or you're getting them from government agencies?
Yeah, from sensors. Sense T is really focusing on real-time data.
Right.
Data is the currency of the digital economy, and real-time data is like the king of data because it's the thing that helps people make decisions immediately. And then when you combine that with clever data analytics, you can actually do prediction and predictive analytics. And this is really where the whole Internet of everything is going, is how do we actually use data to help us make better decisions right now, but also to anticipate in effect and to help us make decisions about future events as well.
So what sort of sectors are you looking at? Agriculture, aquaculture?
Well, we started in agriculture. We really consciously have thought that we're building this kind of knowledge infrastructure, but we'd start with really concrete people, concrete projects, and build it out through experience. So we've got projects in aquaculture, in the oyster industry, in salmon, in viticulture, in dairy, in beef, and we're also doing a really interesting project around adaptive water management, about how communities manage their collective water resources.
Yeah, so that data is open, all the community and the farmers and so on can all plug into it?
Yes, so what we're doing is we're pulling it all together in one place. At this point in time, researchers are accessing the data, and we have this trajectory of creating a commercial-ready platform.
Right.
And what we'll do over time is open up that data so that it can be used by really anyone. One of our thinking is, and one of our KPIs is all the value and applications that are made out of data that we've never thought of. But for that to happen, you have to make data available. Now, the trick, of course, is getting people to share data and make it available in a way that they feel trust. And some things people don't really mind about sharing data, for example, weather on their property, but they really do care very much if it's going to affect their competitive advantage or potentially could be used by a regulator. So you have to be quite careful about how you work through that problem.
Right.
And we're working very closely with the Australian Bureau of Statistics, who's helping us actually think through that and how we actually make geospatial data confidentialised so that we can open it up.
Right, so some of that data might be, for instance, a sensor detecting water quality or soil content.
Temperature. We do a lot of different sensing in the project. We're at the moment just coming up to a larger scale trial where we're looking at soil temperature, soil humidity, leaf wetness, temperature, humidity, UV.
Yeah.
But really what's interesting is how taking that data and combining it with the models. So for example, we're working on a project in viticulture on botrytis. Now botrytis is a very interesting problem because it actually infests early but manifests late.
Right.
So therefore it can be devastating to a crop. And so if we're able to actually get very fine microclimate data information, combine that with models about the risk of botrytis, it gives very powerful tools to the industry to manage the problem and to actually minimise the use of sprays and chemicals because they can really localise where the risk is.
And they can be proactive in dealing with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that ties into another aspect on this too, the supply chain. You look at, say, the PRC, for instance, they're very, very focused on food security. Do you see that sort of application with Sense T's data?
In fact, this is one of our projects as well. It's called Pathways to Market.
Right.
So this was a project which we have many partners in, and what we're actually looking at is how we repurpose production optimisation data to actually give consumers, both in China, US and Australia, information about where their food comes from and the conditions under which it's produced.
Yeah. So which industries have you found being the most interested in the project?
Agriculture, of course, is where we started initially, but we find that once we start engaging and talking with communities and industries and people understand the concept, the ideas are limitless about how you could use this sort of technology. So we're scoping in projects around new financial instruments, for example, biodiversity markets, carbon markets. We're looking at freight and logistics optimisation in real time. Very, very important issue to a state like Tasmania, which is an island.
Yeah.
We're looking at projects around health, around tourism. There's really quite a lot of opportunities. The most important thing is to think about, when we design this program, how do you design for scale? How do you actually build an approach that allows many people to actually access data and create value out of it?
Now, you mentioned before that you'd hit some concerns about regulatory risk. Was that widespread?
Yeah, I think it is actually.
Right.
The concern, I think, people, if you're asking them to share data, and generally if there's a value proposition for people doing that, or that it's part of kind of almost a community solidarity thing, which it often is, then people are really quite willing to do that. But they want to know that their competitive advantage isn't going to be compromised, or that the data isn't going to be used by a regulator, say, for example, to take action against them. So I think that it is really important as we work through this new thinking, and really Sense T is a very new thinking, is that we do it in a very considered way, working together with end users and gradually opening up data. It's not like something you can just, design an algorithm and press a set button and say, off you go into an architecture. You really need to work it through quite carefully, a use case by use case, and then learn through that such that we can actually then scale in itself that open innovation approach.
So most of the funding, where's that coming from at the moment?
It's actually a mixture. Sense T started actually as part of two things. One is looking at how Tasmania could take advantage of fast broadband, ubiquitous fast broadband. And the second was that we went through a fairly big structural adjustment in our forest industry, and so we were looking for ways to diversify our economy and make it more resilient. And so we got funding from the forestry structural adjustment funding from the federal government, and that's why in our initial projects we really focused on those communities that had been adversely affected.
And looking ahead, where do you see the sustainability of the project?
We're doing really a lot of thinking about that. I mean, we want to build a community knowledge infrastructure that stays out there. So we made a business decision that we would build a sensor network without ever owning a sensor asset. Now that sounds like a pretty radical thing to do, but it's actually been a really important part of the process for us, because it meant that what we needed to do is really talk to end users about creating value. Because if we were creating value, then people are willing to invest in sensors because of the value they're getting in the apps at the end of the day. And so we're doing a lot of work in thinking through this model, and really the ultimate objective is really to kind of create an ecosystem where we've got researchers doing fantastic research here. We've got this whole commercial arm, if you like, operating on next to it, and that we're basically be able to take the outcomes of research quicker and get it into people's hands. But then really where the holy grail is that through actually creating that opportunity, that the data can then be made available back to the researchers again. So that instead of every time we want to think about a new problem or a new challenge, we don't have to go back and collect the same data again and again and again. And so really we think about it as a pretty important part of the knowledge infrastructure, and really from the university's point of view about how universities engage in the knowledge economy in creating and sharing knowledge.
So how do you see this going for the Tasmanian economy? Because Tasmania is somewhat challenged with this.
Well, I think Tasmania, like many regional communities, is challenged. I think if you compared Tasmania to regional Victoria or regional Queensland, you'd find pretty similar indicators. Obviously, it's different in those states that have big, big centralisation in cities. Tasmania is the most decentralised state in Australia. So, what we really need to do is to diversify our economy and make it more resilient. And so what we see the opportunity in something like Sense T is that we can actually use technology to increase productivity and competitiveness of our existing industries, but then grow the new digital service exports of the future. And so that's what we're really interested in, how we actually crack that. Now, to be successful in that, we think it's really important to focus on this open innovation issue. We know that 96% of businesses are small businesses. We know that 63% of Australians work in small businesses, and we know from experiences in Europe that 85% of new jobs are created in small businesses. So if that's the case, then it's really important that if big data, Internet of Everything is part of this future that we want to create, we better be damn sure that we make it available to those people who are the innovators.
So where do you see, to conclude, Ros, where do you see the Sense T being in 5 years' time?
Well, we hope to have established Tasmania as a living laboratory for research on high-density, low-cost sensing, or the Internet of Everything, that we've really cracked some problems and created value for end users, that we have a thriving ecosystem where researchers, where innovators, where business and government are all kind of working together, and that we've created a really strong understanding and acceptance. And I think the other thing I really hope for is to inspire people, particularly younger people. We know that we've got a shortage in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and math, and we really need to, I think, excite young people again about the possibilities of science and ICT. And I think the best way of doing that is showing the concrete ways that it can be used and really cool IT to address problems or issues in their community and create business opportunities. So that for me would be a real indicator of success, that we're seeing young people saying, wow, I really want to do ICT, I really want to do STEM, because I can see that I can do incredibly cool things with it.
So making it relevant to the community.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Ros, thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for joining Decoding the New Economy.